everybody. Welcome to the No Name Music Cast. My name's Tim, and this is
Joy.
And welcome to the show. Now, it is my turn to pick the topic. And as ever, Joy doesn't know what I'm going to pick. So, this week's topic is something that's very important to me, and I hope that you will enjoy learning a little bit more about it.
Okay.
Tonight's show is going to be about the legendary concert. Now, people, when you say legendary concerts, they probably think you mean Live Aid or Woodstock. And both of those were reasonably legendary concerts. But in my little world, the one that is better than all of those, it's Knebworth 90.
Which you shared with me.
So Knebworth 90, as the name suggests, was a concert that took place in 1990. And before I get into discussing it, I'd ask a question for you, Joy. Had you ever heard of Knebworth 90 before I'd mentioned it to you?
No, not even a little bit.
Had you even heard of any concerts that happened at Knebworth?
I'd never heard the word Knebworth. I'm assuming that's a place.
Yeah, it's a place like I think on the property of Knebworth, there's a stately home there as well. But it's famous, like Led Zeppelin famously played at Knebworth. The last ever Queen concert was at Knebworth. Lots of bands over the years have played at Knebworth. It's not so much like a stadium like Wembley Stadium or an arena or anything, but it's a place where concerts take place and have done ever since like the early 70s or maybe even late 60s, actually.
But when I think about it, I mean, I've seen a few concerts on YouTube and looked up some things that people have said were good, but I don't know that I always necessarily knew where exactly the concert was taking place. So potentially I could have known didn't know it was at Knebworth based off of like the big concert you're saying. But no, that never was anything I had heard of till you spoke about it a few times in the podcast.
Well, there you go. Well, anyway, 1990 was a very formative year for me.
I was born that year. Sorry, Tim, I had to.
1990, I'd been already married 3 times, had 48 grandchildren, and what happened? Joy was just born in 1990.
I mean, it was a very formative year for me.
Yeah.
Literally the year I became a human.
Well, I mean, there you go. I mean, what more can we say? Thank you, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
All right. Well, it wasn't a formative year for you, Tim. And no, he hadn't actually been married 3 times, guys.
No, I was just making that up. So I was certainly in my love of music and development of playing guitar. I'd been playing guitar for a few years. I hadn't yet played in a proper band. And, my playing was not at the level that I am at now with it. So it was very early in my playing career. And I'd missed Live Aid. Now, Live Aid, I believe, was 86, 5?
That seems right. That's I remember being mid-80s.
Yeah, I know Phil is shouting at his car radio because I should know that off the top of my head. But Live Aid was 80, and... I didn't see
85, you were right the first time.
There you go. So I didn't see that concert live. I've seen it dozens and dozens of times since. But I remember when it was on TV, we was on holiday in Selsey in the south coast of England. And every caravan and the caravan site that we were on had Live Aid on. And we didn't watch it because my dad was not into it. And I wasn't... I like music, but I wasn't really into that at that time. So it wasn't super important to me to see it.
Gotcha.
But by the time 1990 rolls around, I discovered rock music, because normally I was only ever listening to chart pop music. I used to listen to Capital Radio, which was the top 40 station in London. But I was just learning how to play guitar. I think I had my first electric guitar at that point. And said I was learning about like rock bands and things like that. And then on Thames TV comes Knebworth 90. Now, they didn't show it live. I think MTV here in the US showed it live or thereabouts. But on Thames TV, it was like on a Thursday night or something. And I remember it. I either recorded it or my mum and dad recorded it. But I remember having it on a VHS tape. And I had a VHS video recorder in my bedroom, which was incredibly exciting because a lot of people didn't have that.
So this happened, and I did go back and watch it. I remember seeing that Paul McCartney was there, Eric Clapton was there. And the part with Eric Clapton is the part you remember, I think, because you've talked a little bit about it because of the guitar playing. Is this the concert where you picked up on his guitar playing?
That's correct, yeah. So I'm going to later on in the episode. I'm going to give a rundown of all the people who.
Oh, sorry, I ruined that for you.
No, you're fine. You're fine. But you're right, because I don't consider Eric Clapton to be a huge guitar influence as big as Brian May or Eddie Van Halen or some of the other artists that I really like to listen to. Also, I love Stevie Ray Vaughan, even though he's not like a big influence on my playing. Watching Eric Clapton at this concert, I worked out how to make a guitar sing. He would put it on the neck pickup, which on an electric guitar, whether a Fender or a Gibson guitar, gives a very thick singing sound. And I noticed the way that he was shaking the strings for vibrato when he bent the strings, and it made the notes sing. And that is how I found out how to do that.
So how was it like, did you have to watch through a few times? Like, how did you specifically pick up on that?
Well, I just saw what he was doing. I heard the sound and it sounded great. And then I saw what his fingers were doing, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I get you." So you do that, and then you do that, and then you shake it a bit, and that's
and then
how
you just kind of mess with it till you figured it out.
Yeah, and that's like a light bulb went bing.
I mean, that's interesting. I guess though, in some ways, I've watched people do things and go, "Oh yeah, so that's how you did that." So it makes logical sense.
But I mean, these days, for anything you want to learn about, you bring it up on YouTube, and there's someone showing you exactly how to do it.
But I love whenever you watch someone do something like that on YouTube and you're like, oh, that seems so simple. And then you go to do it yourself and you're like, it seems simple because I was watching somebody who's been doing it for 10 years do it. You know what I mean? And then you're trying to do it and you're like, and I'm electrocuted now.
mind you, you say that. We used to have a Kia Forte car, and one of the headlight bulbs went out in it. And one of the bulbs you can get to very easily, but the other one, there's a battery in the way, and you cannot get to the bulb. And I undid the screws, and it just does not come off. Like, the headlight will not come out. So I found a YouTube video of, like, how to change a bulb on a 2010 Kia Forte EX driver's side. And then there's some guy from the dealership goes, "Oh, I'm Bob from I don't know, blah, 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 Kia. I'm going to show you how to change the bulb." And then the good thing is he got it, and he said, right, he said, "You see it doesn't come out." He said, "What you do," he said, "tap it on the left-hand side, then kind of turn it."
Did it shatter?
No. And then I went down to the car, and you tap it on the side, and you sort of turn it, and it just comes out. I was like, oh, thank you, Bob from Minnesota Kia or whatever it is.
See, I would have had the opposite luck. I would have done that, like the whole bulb would have just fell out and shattered into 1,000 places. And I'd be like, darn my luck. So I have this theory, though, Tip, and maybe you can confirm or deny it. And this may sound a little sexist, but just hear me out. I'm not being sexist. Is it just my husband, or is it all men everywhere who do things like that? Like, they find something on the internet that seems really simple and they think, I can do that on my car, or I can fix this at home. And Charlie's very IT savvy. Most of the time when it comes to IT stuff, he just knows how to do it. But there are like mechanical things or home things that he's convinced he can do. And every time he does it, it always ends up costing me more money. Either there's another part he needs, or he needs this tool that would make it easier, or there's some piece he didn't take into account when he watched that YouTube video. I don't know if it's just my husband or if this is a universal male thing, but I swear it happens every time.
Well, I think the knack is, and I always try to stay in my lane to some degree. So,
you're right.
So see, like, I feel capable of changing the bulbs in my car. I would feel capable changing an air filter. I would feel capable. I replaced a visor, some visor in a car we had. Again, YouTube video showed me how to do it.
I can put the windshield wiper replacements on. I got you.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. However, I could pull up a YouTube video that would show me how to change the brake pads, or a YouTube video that shows me how to replace the spark plugs. Let me tell you what I'm not doing. I'm not replacing brakes or spark plugs because I don't have
spark plugs once.
Yeah, I don't have the tools. I don't really know what I'm doing. If I break it, the car's completely immobile, and I'd have to get a tow truck to take it somewhere. So it's staying in your lane. Like I recently on a guitar I had to replace the nut on it, which is the bit up the top where the strings run through.
Yeah.
And I pulled up a number of videos and it seemed very simple. It's like you put a bit of wood on it and you tap it and it pops off, and then you do a few rudimentary measurements and then you glue the new one on. And I did that and it was fine. However, I would not attempt a fret job, which is pulling out frets or re-leveling frets, because you do the file 3 times the wrong way and the whole thing is ruined, and then you're going to have to take it to someone that's going to cost you a fortune. So, again, it's knowing when to stay in your lane.
See, and that's accurate. And you know what, part of it, though, as I've gotten older, I've realized Charlie has more keen on asking people to, like, paying people to do it. Some of it is when we had less money and we were younger. Mm-hmm. As I've gotten older and have a little bit more money at my disposal, I think he's less keen on doing it. But yeah, every time he starts a project. Well, another thing was he bought a laser, like an actual laser to cut things like wood and stuff, but it has to be programmed to your computer. And it was like I had to buy 17 additional things to get that laser to work. It's still in the garage. He made one thing off of it. One thing. This is not related to music at all. I was just curious. All right, Tim, back to the concert.
So anyway, Knebworth 90, very important concert for me. So I just wanted to run through some of the facts about it. So it was a charity concert, and it was in aid of the Nordhoff Robbins Music Therapy Centre and British School for the Performing Arts. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to raise a load of money for a new music therapy centre that they were doing. And Nordhoff Robbins is apparently a very reputable charity that does a lot of good work with music therapy.
Okay.
So every year, Nordhoff Robbins, they would give what they called Silver Clef Awards to artists for their outstanding services to the British music industry. Now, I don't know quite what their criteria was that, or why they were giving these Silver Clef Awards out. I don't know, but maybe it was just a promotional thing to promote their charity. I don't know. Anyhow, so what they wanted to do was put on a really big concert and raise a load of money for this music therapy centre. So ever since 1976, they've been handing out these Silver Clef Awards. So the people who got these awards were The Who, Genesis, Cliff Richard, Elton John, Pink Floyd, Status Quo, Rolling Stones, Eric Clapton, Queen, Dire Straits, Phil Collins, David Bowie, Paul McCartney, George Michael, and Robert Plant. So they decided what they would do was invite everyone who had a Silver Clef Award to perform at this concert. And then everybody who was available to do so on that day committed to do it, and they did it for free.
I mean, that's a heck of a concert lineup.
Exactly. So the good thing about this concert is that I actually know somebody who was there.
Whoa, name drop. Wait, can we get them on the show?
Well, you know, I thought about that, but then there was the time difference. But you know Kev from Freak Jam fame, who's with Lisa? Yeah, I think he's a couple of years older than me, I think. And he was at that concert.
Huh. Man, maybe we'll get him to do a little biopic for us and send it over. Just a little biopic. Could you send that this way, Kev? So I'm guessing he was in the audience.
Yeah, he wasn't performing yet. I mean, he would have been younger, but I mean, he was there. He witnessed Knebworth 90 for all its Knebworthness.
What did he say about it whenever you talked to him about it?
He said he went to use the toilet and completely missed Tears for Fears because the queue was that long.
Oh, that would be... I hate when stuff like that happens. But whenever I was at the Women's March in Washington, D.C., there was so many people you couldn't actually move. Mm-hmm. And there were there was a bunch of speakers on stage. Like, I think the Judd sisters were there and different things like that. But we couldn't get to the stage, so we could hear them yelling, but we had no idea what they were yelling about. And so I actually watched the people back and tried to identify Madonna yelling about things she would do to the White House that we're not going to repeat because that would put us on lists. And I identified, okay, so that was the person yelling at that moment, but I couldn't hear it or see it.
See, that's have you ever spent New Year's Eve in New York City or something?
Not quite, but I've been to big venues during. It wasn't quite New York City, but I know what you're saying.
Okay, well, I've been to two of these things. Well, I spent New Year on the Strip in Vegas one time, and that was incredibly well organized because what they do, they shut off the Vegas Strip, and then they create where the road is. They create like two lanes for people to go in, and then the middle section is like would be regularly the median, but they have barriers up and they have police in there and, you know, first responders and stuff, and they're all in the middle. So you pile onto the Strip, depending on what side you come into it, and then you're in the crowd for the big countdown for midnight. And all the video screens in Vegas all do the big countdown on their screens at once. It's actually really cool. But what they do is when midnight strikes and everyone wants to get out of there, they move the barriers in about half as much again. So you still have the bit in the middle with the police and the first responders. However, instantly you now have twice the amount of space so everyone can move on and do what they want to do.
See, Disney does something like that. So if you've ever been to Disney World, and this is, I don't think it was necessarily a holiday. Disney does fireworks every night during the summer that are basically like the size of the 4th of July, but every day at Walt Disney World. And so when they do that, you're all sitting there and they don't do regular fireworks. Sometimes Epcot does like a light show, or sometimes they do actual fireworks. They have like a boardwalk and things like that where tons and tons, or if you're at any of the parks that stay open like Epcot, you're stuck. Like you have to watch them, like after it hits a certain time, you're stuck waiting. But then it, like you said, they kind of like open the floodgates in a way that way everybody disperses really quickly versus you stuck in the lane of traffic trying to get through.
Exactly. Well, I also did New Year's. I've actually done New Year's twice in central London. I think on both occasions, or on one of the occasions, it was so noisy you couldn't hear Big Ben strike 12. It was that noisy. And they don't have any provision like they did in Vegas, where you just pile on like Tower Bridge or wherever it was in London, and then midnight comes and everyone cheers, and then you're shaking hands with random people that you don't know who they are. And
this
then,
is pre-COVID, of course.
Well, of course. Yeah, the good old days.
Now you're like, don't touch me.
The good old days when you would hug a stranger and wish them New Year. You remember those days?
Yeah, they seem so long ago.
And the thing is with that, then, there's nowhere for anyone to go. So there was one time when we wanted to get from like Tower Bridge to the tube station, which is like a 15-second, 20-second walk normally. Literally, it's like the other side of the street. And it took us, half an hour or something silly just because we couldn't get through the thrust of people.
That's the way it is if you're ever downtown in Blacksburg during a Virginia Tech football game.
Yeah, I've been downtown in Blacksburg many times, but never. If there's a football thing going on, I'm nowhere near it.
Well, I was downtown doing other things. There just happened to be a Virginia Tech football game. And of course, I don't keep up with that. So I had no clue. And therefore, we got stuck for what was like 3 hours. Yeah,
I can't be dealing with that.
I don't suggest it. I don't suggest it. That's all I can say.
All right. Joy's tips: steer clear of downtown Blacksburg when there's a football game going on.
Yeah. And if you get an Uber, they might not be from the area, so they don't know the alternate routes, so they stick you on Main Street. Yeah, it's not a fun time.
There you are, UK fans. A little tip for you for Southwest Virginia next time you visit.
If you're ever around.
Splendid. Okay, so what I want to do, I'm just going to go through the artists one by one and just see if you have any thoughts or opinions on the various artists that were on this concert. So I said I gave off the big list of all the people who won these Silver Clef Awards. However, only the people that were available did it. Now, of course, Queen were a winner because, for our bingo card listeners out there, Queen were a Silver Clef winner, but by 1990 they were no longer touring and Freddie was very unwell, so that's why they were not on here. So the show opened with Tears for Fears. Are you a Tears for Fears fan, Joy?
I mean, I know the song Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Change, and I feel like didn't at this concert they just kind of all played like their major hits, like a few songs.
Yeah, I mean, the CD set that I have and the video I have of this, I don't think is the complete set list. The track orders for both of them are different, but it's not the entire concert, but they certainly did play "Everybody Wants to Rule the World."
So, I mean, I'm a Tears for Fears fan, but I wouldn't say I'm more than what you hear on the radio. But they're a good band. I mean, don't get me wrong, but when did Tears for Fears just kind of, I feel like they were only popular for a short realm of time, and then they kind of fell out of fame. Or is that just in my brain? Well,
they were an 80s band. Their big album was songs from The Big Chair. And then later, I think late 80s or early 90s, they had another song called Sowing the Seeds of Love, which was very popular.
Yeah. So they're kind of like, to me, they're kind of like a blip in time, but for what they were quite good.
Sure, and I think they're still out there because I think Weezer covered Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and I think they appeared on like Jimmy Kimmel or something with Weezer, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I'm fairly certain that's true because Weezer did that album where they covered a lot of 80s stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right about that. So that they became popular again. Also, Tears for Fears is one of those bands I feel like is used in movie soundtracks a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the other big song they had was "Shout," and I think that's been used in films as well.
Yeah, I feel like because their music's so distinct, you can convey a genre or like a feeling or what you want going on in any moment. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to put into a movie soundtrack. So that's also what I associate them with.
Yeah. So anyhow, the next people on the bill was Status Quo. Now, I'm really interested to know, do you know who Status Quo are?
Only because of you, because we talked about that Rockin' All Over the World song. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they were that popular in America. No,
because they opened Live Aid, the other concert that isn't quite as popular as Knebworth 90, of course. And
no one's ever heard of that one.
No, exactly. With Rockin' All Over the World. And I said, I was so surprised to find that is a John Fogerty cover. I thought it was their song.
I guess I didn't know that, but I could hear it. I imagine his version would have been different.
It's similar. I mean, their sound is more like a boogie rock sound.
Yeah. Whereas every time I hear John Fogerty, all I can think of is just CCR. So that's all the sound I get from him.
Yeah, if you imagine CCR boogie rock, that's what his version of it sounds like.
That makes sense. Yeah, I didn't know that. So those with your bingo card, there's something for you to mark off. Did you know?
There we are, you see.
And I'm learning all about Status Quo because we've talked about him a few times that I had never even heard of him till you said that. But I actually think I had heard the song "Rocking All Over the World." I just didn't know who it was.
Yeah, I mean they are a British institution. They are a band that the person on the street, even if they're not a fan, would know Status Quo.
You guys in your Tom Jones, I never knew.
Yeah, they're probably in the same category as Tom Jones, I would say. I've seen Status Quo 3 or 4 times. And do you know why I've seen them? Because my mum likes Status Quo, and I went with her to concerts at Wembley and other places to see them because she likes them so much.
Huh. No clue, guys. We're bringing an education to the American audience. Go look up. He says status. I say status quo. All right, Tim. Who's next on the list?
Okay, so the next one on the bill is Cliff Richard and the Shadows. Do any of those names mean anything to you?
They're from the 50s. He's from the 50s, right?
Yeah, Cliff Richard, who's known as the Peter Pan of pop. He has had a hit. I think he's had a #1 in every decade, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. And I don't know whether he's had one in the 2020s yet, but certainly he's known for that.
Yeah, and he looks like his face kind of looks like, okay, it's going to sound really rude, but I've seen him, and I know he kind of does like a good golly Miss Molly type music. That's what I kind of associate him with. And his face looks like if you took a Ken doll, if you aged it and then kind of melted it. That's what he looks like now.
Well, Cliff has to stay forever young. Cliff is probably 80 at this point or something. But
probably.
But Cliff has to have that. I mean, that's his whole persona. But I mean, he started off playing rock and roll. But I mean, his music changed through the years with different tastes. I mean, his 80s albums certainly sounded similar to what music of the 80s would sound like. And when things got more poppy and dance orientated in the 90s, he followed that. Cliff's out there.
So so what I know of him is mostly know about his 50s stuff when he's with the Shadows and they're very boy band 1950s look. Mm-hmm. It kind of seems like he tried to keep the 1950s look alive as he got older in the way his face looks. And I'm thinking there may have been some surgery.
Well, Cliff has had much success. He also sells wine in Portugal. Can I tell you that?
Of course he does. I would have never guessed that.
So when we went to Portugal about 10, 12 years ago on a trip, it was a cheap holiday out of season. It was very nice. And we was walking like downtown Albufeira, the place that we went to stay in. And there was a few off licenses. I think have we covered off licenses before?
No.
So
should I be prepared?
No, I mean, like in England, an off license is a place where you buy your booze.
Oh, okay. I mean, no, we haven't, but I get it.
And the reason it's called an off license is because a pub are licensed premises, and if you're purchasing alcohol outside of licensed premises, so you're purchasing it off licensed premises. So it's called an off license, or familiarly, people would call it an offie.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. So is it like generally just like a little store or something? Or is it? Well,
they're different chains. Like in Virginia, we have the ABC stores, which are governed by the state of Virginia. There are several chains of off license. There's Thresher, and I can't remember the other, but there's several of them.
So do you get your alcohol to go there, or do you drink it there?
No, you get it to go.
Okay.
But equally, you can buy liquor in the supermarket, or you can buy it in a petrol station as well.
Depends on what state you're in. For those who aren't in America here, certain states have certain laws around alcohol.
Yeah, but like in England, you can go into a BP and just buy Jack Daniels if that's what you want.
And when I was in Utah, I was shocked to find out their beer is watered down. Oh. Did you know that, Tim?
I did not know that.
So, I think beer is usually about 5% alcohol generally. Mm-hmm. Theirs is 3.5%. But it's done because people just go across the border and stock up in the other states and just bring it back with them. And then the other thing that they do in Utah is liquor licenses are divvied out based off of population. Mm-hmm. So that's how they keep the amount of establishments that can sell to you, like at a restaurant or a bar or pub or whatever, low, because they do it off of the very it's you have to have a certain percentage of a population. It has to reach a number before you could give a new liquor license out, and that's their way of trying to keep the amount of licenses low.
There you go.
No.
Well,
people are like, this is a music show. What's happening?
With all the off-license talk, I should just wrap up by saying that in Portugal, you go past an off-license, and a lot of them had a big, massive cardboard cutout of Cliff Richard, and he's selling his whatever brand wine that he's involved with.
Well, I mean, that's not just a European thing, though. I mean, Dwayne The Rock Johnson has a tequila. Ryan Reynolds has a gin here. So they do that in America, too.
Yeah, it's true. But it was just funny to see. It was like, Cliff, why are you selling wine? Where did that come from? Because he doesn't advertise.
It's got to be worth money.
Yeah, because he doesn't advertise that in England. So it's just weird to see.
Maybe in Portugal, his music wasn't as popular. So he was trying to lure in the other things.
Let me tell you, Cliff Richard's hit Wired for Sound was a hit everywhere.
That's Joy has no idea what it is. Yeah, it's a hit everywhere. Hides under the table.
I'm gonna post a link in the Facebook group of Cliff Richard's Wired for Sound video, because it is not only a fabulous song written by B.A. Robertson. The video is a cinematic masterpiece, and it was filmed in a shopping centre in Milton Keynes. I'm just saying.
I love how I'm like, yeah, masterpiece. What are we talking about? Okay. Well, that took a turn. All right. What are some of the other artists that were there?
Okay, getting back to Knebworth 19, ladies and gentlemen. The next artist on the bill is Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin fame.
Never heard of them. Don't know what you're talking about.
Well, do you know what's funny? So formative me in
That was a joke, everybody.
Yeah. Formative years of me, 1990, I had no idea who Robert Plant was, and I had not heard any music of Led Zeppelin in 1990.
Well, there's a few Led Zeppelin songs I could do without hearing again. But so was it just because you were stuck on the pop channel at home and you never got the chance, or?
Well, I mean, this is funny, and I've discussed this with Hannah a number of times. Classic rock, which is loved and embraced in this country, and even to the point where most towns have a classic rock FM radio station, that's not really a thing in England. I mean, it's different now because you have digital channels and you have DAB radio and you have streaming, this, that, the other. But certainly growing up, you had your FM radio, and then you had Capital Radio, which I used to listen to, which was just like top 40 pop. And then you had a lot of other stations that were similar to that. You know, depending on where you went in the country, you had different stations. But nobody was playing AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, Billy Idol, all the songs that we hear to death here on FM rock radio.
What's weird about that to me is because like a lot of your Freak Jam friends and the ones that I associate with, that you guys talk a lot about classic rock, alternative rock. It seems to be kind of their forte. So I just assumed that it was the same, but I guess now it's becoming more. And was it like it wasn't mainstream? So unless you were specifically looking for it, you weren't hearing it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, some like BBC Two or Channel 4, which were more arty sort of TV stations, not quite the main TV channels, because I only grew up before TV stations. They sometimes weekends in the evenings might put on an Allman Brothers concert, or they might put on some kind of concert or other. But certainly classic rock radio as we have here, when I was growing up, was not a thing. So, and this is going to be very stereotyping, and just hear me out for a second. In the Spice Girls video, Stop Right Now, they're like in a little, and it might be in Ireland or Scotland, but it's some type of town in the UK, and it's a bunch of like older people. They're like, here's these crazy girls dancing in the streets, and they're like all boring old people. And the way you're describing this kind of sounds a little boring in some ways. I'd just like you to know, Joy, that the Spice Girls, the movie, is an accurate depiction of UK living. And all their music videos. That would be correct. It's where I got all my knowledge from. I'm going to go look it up, and that was actually filmed somewhere completely not in the UK. It was probably in New Zealand or somewhere, I don't know. I don't know. It's just funny because it's like, here's these crazy girls coming on the street. It's all a bunch of like older, hardworking, like what looks like UK people. We don't listen to this crazy music. It's their version of a Footloose town. All right. Who else we got? Well, we didn't really say much about Robert Plant. Well, other than the fact that said this was the first time I ever heard Robert Plant's music. So it was the first time you heard him, period. Yeah, I'd never heard him sing, play, anything. It was only because the very last song on that concert, Jimmy Page joins him for one song, and it was only when I asked some people around, it's like, oh yeah, they're the two guys from Led Zeppelin. I was like, oh, I don't know that music. What is it? Yeah, I mean, I can't actually identify the first time I heard any one specific. I'm trying to think back if there was a time that I learned one specific artist. I don't think I can identify that. I guess because I kind of grew up in a household that listened to a little bit of everything when it comes to music. Mm-hmm. But like for me, I cannot identify the first time I learned of a certain song or like a certain band. I'm sure there was some time I had to be the first time I heard it, but that's kind of interesting that you have that very distinct memory, though. Yeah, because I liked it. But I just didn't know of his Led Zeppelin heritage or anything. I thought it sounded cool. He looks pretty cool, too. He looks like a cool dude you want to hang out with even to this day. Yeah, I mean, he's Robert Plant. He was in Led Zeppelin, for goodness sake. I mean, of course he's cool. He's very friendly looking. Exactly. Anyhow, so we had the Robert Plant set with Jimmy Page joining. And then the next one was Genesis was there. Oh, you mean with that Phil Collins guy? Well, the interesting thing is that they performed as Genesis, and then Phil Collins did some songs by himself too. The super cool thing about the Genesis set. They did Mama, and I think they did a couple of other Genesis-specific songs.
Yeah.
But then they did a really cool rock and roll medley, and it's about 12, 13 minutes long.
Wow.
And it starts with their song Turn It On Again, which you're probably familiar with.
I have heard that, yes.
Yep, and then it goes into Somebody to Love, Blues Brothers song. Then goes into I Can't Get No Satisfaction.
Rolling Stones.
Then goes into Twist and Shout.
Okay.
Then goes into Reach Out, I'll Be There.
Oh, wow.
It then goes into You've Lost That Loving Feeling. It then goes into Pinball Wizard.
I mean, to do anything from like The Who to the Righteous Brothers is pretty cool, honestly.
Yeah, and then it goes into in the Midnight Hour. Wow. And then it wraps back up into Turn It On Again.
See, that's a very vast amount of songs to do in 12 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, they don't play the whole song. You know, they play bits of them, but it is absolutely fantastic. And if I can find it, if I can find a YouTube video of it, I will post it up in the group as well, because it is amazing. I would like
to see that. That sounds cool.
And then the whole of it's Genesis, but I mean, there's a whole bunch of studio touring professionals that are part of the Genesis band.
Okay, so I'm going to tell everybody a funny story one time. Phil Collins, I learned from, so Tim was discussing to me about Phil Collen, who is a musician. What band was Phil Collen in, not Phil Collins, Tim?
Phil Collen, he is the guitar player for Def Leppard.
Tim was going on and on about him, and I'm sitting there thinking, Phil Collins, none of this makes any sense, but I'm just nodding my head. And then I was like, do you mean Phil Collins? And he was like, no, Phil Collen. And let me tell you, Def Leppard and Phil Collins are two completely different stage shows. But I'm sitting there going, whoa.
Phil Collen is an incredibly handsome man. He is incredibly well built. He works out all the time. He's been a vegan like most of his life. He's super into health. I mean, like, he performs exclusively without a shirt. And to be fair, if I looked like him, I would not wear one either. And
Tim would never wear a shirt ever.
No, I mean, the guy's in his late 50s at this point, and he performs with Def Leppard, and he looks like a ripped bodybuilder type. but you know, he couldn't be the polar opposite from Phil Collins.
But I'm sitting there looking at Tim talking about him. He's like, yeah, he's in all this great shape, and you know, he was just like raw, and I was like, hold up, Phil Collins? And he was like, no, Phil Collen. And I was like, oh, like I had a whole conversation with me smiling and nodding and have no clue what's going on. So this day, that was one of my favorite things, because once I realized it, me and Tim started laughing so hard because I'm sitting there so confused. Because on top of it, Phil Collins is in pretty bad shape now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we discussed before on the podcast. I mean,
the drum injuries.
Yeah, Father Time has not been kind to Phil, and his back is super messed up, and he can barely walk. I mean, in the last tour he did before stuff got locked down, his voice was in tip-top shape, but you know, he comes on stage as a hobbling old man with a stick, and he doesn't look good for, you know, there's a lot of people in their 70s who still look good and are getting it done, but I said, time has not been kind to Phil, but he still has the voice. The voice is still...
And he has such a rich, distinct tone. Like, there's no one else who sounds like Phil Collins to me. Like, I could literally not know what band or anything was playing, but if I heard his voice, I would know right away it was him.
Absolutely. And the funny thing is, the older I get, the more appealing Phil Collins' voice is to me. I don't know how that works.
It's kind of like when men get into their 50s and yacht rock starts becoming real fun.
Yeah, you know, I hit 46 and I bought a Phil Collins box set. I mean, what can I tell you?
Tim, you're listening, you're rock edge. Oh, Lord. Okay. What other artists were there?
Well, also on the same bill, of course, was Eric Clapton, which we have discussed. And using the same studio guys band, I mean, the Genesis band, the Phil Collins band, Eric Clapton band, a lot of them had the same players on stage. They're like the cream of the crop studio touring guys who played with a lot of these people at the time. But also following on from that was Dire Straits. Dire Straits was there.
And of course, I know of Dire Straits. We've talked about, I have a hate for one of their songs, but they do get money for nothing.
Yeah, they do indeed.
Chicks for free.
but I mean, Mark Knopfler is an absolutely phenomenal guitar player, and he continues to be a phenomenal guitar player. And
they have a very cool sound in general. There's something very fun. They kind of mix that rock, but almost kind of poppy, happy, but fun type thing going. I don't know how to explain it. Dire Straits is one of those bands that I just think has a really fun sound to them. They may be a rock band, but I think they kind of take it to a different level.
Sure. And I mean, Brothers in Arms is probably their definitive work in the realm of Dire Straits. I mean, they had other albums before that live album, Love Over Gold, and making movies, and they had Sultans of Swing, of course, and Twisting by the Pool, and lots of other hits. But when you get to Brothers in Arms, Brothers in Arms is, if you was going to tell somebody that's what you need to get, Brothers in Arms is the thing. And I think we covered this before, that album came out at the same time that CDs came out, and some of the original Philips CD players came with a copy of Brothers in Arms in the box as part of a promotion at the time.
So weren't they like one of the first bands to play on MTV or something, or am I remembering that wrong?
I mean, certainly their video for Money for Nothing was on what they call heavy rotation on MTV, because they even use that "I Want My MTV" refrain in the song. Yeah.
Maybe that's what I'm associated with. The "I Want My MTV." I'm associated with it was played on. That's probably what it is. I knew there was some fact that went along with MTV in their music video.
Yeah, and that line in Money for Nothing is sung by Sting, but I think you probably knew that.
Yeah, I did. We may have even touched about it. And it's also, obviously, it's his voice. That's another person. Sting's one of those people that as soon as he starts singing, you know it's Sting singing. There's no distincting anyone else.
Exactly. And do you know why he's called Sting? Rock and roll fact.
Why is that?
Well, I can't remember what his real name is. It's not obviously Sting.
Okay.
But he was a school teacher. And he had a favorite sweater, which was a yellow and black stripy sweater. And the kids in the classroom used to call him Sting because he looked like a bumblebee.
His real name's Gordon, and the only reason I know that is because the first time I heard it, it made me think of Gordon Ramsay.
Oh.
I don't know why, but I associate Sting with Gordon Ramsay. But I don't know what the rest of his name is, but his real name's Gordon.
When I hear Gordon, I think of Gordon the Gopher, but that means nothing to you. Andy Peters in the Broom Cupboard. I don't know whether I should cover that at this point. Maybe we will cover that another time.
I wrote a lot of words there I didn't understand, but move along.
It was a kids' TV program and a puppet, basically.
Oh, Lord. I've learned a lot about British TV through this podcast. There's so much in the last episode that I'm like, I'm not even sure what he's saying anymore.
I can talk about Metal Mickey. I can talk about Rent-A-Ghost if you like. Chorlton and the Wheelies.
Why do you guys have the weirdest sounding cartoons? Metal Mickey, Rent-A-Ghost.
They weren't even... Metal Mickey and Rent-A-Ghost were live action. They weren't cartoons.
That makes it even weirder. Okay. All right. Well, now I want to see a picture of Metal Mickey in the future.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll put it on our Instagram for everyone.
So random. So cities, if you've listened to the podcast, cities in Europe sound like candy and their cartoons sound nightmarish. Right. It's him. It's another artist.
Okay. So appearing after Elton John was this guy. He's not that popular, so I don't know how he got on the bill. And I'm surprised that he was actually given an award, given how obscure he is. And that would be Paul McCartney.
Never heard of him.
No.
He's never going to make it. That dude's never going to make it. I mean, and the thing about Paul McCartney, though, you were talking about people in their 70s who are still getting it. He performed, and he's so good live still to this day.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think we've mentioned before, I saw Paul McCartney 7-8 years ago in Greensboro. And I mean, I think he was 70 odd at that point. I think he's in his late 70s now, but he was certainly in his 70s.
Yeah.
And he played for almost 3 hours.
That's what I was going to say. When I see him play live, he never seems like he's exhausted or tired. He always looks like he's just having the time of his life. Like it's just a party for him. And then a lot of times when you see like a lot when him and Ringo get together, it's even cuter when you watch them together.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, he has like the stamina of like a 30-year-old. Like I watched him. I'm like, oh my gosh, how are you still doing this?
Well, I suppose the other thing you have to consider, a lot of these acts that have been out for a long time, which have a name like Paul McCartney, they didn't have to work that day. They didn't have to drive in rush hour traffic to get to the venue.
True.
They didn't have to unload their own gear. They didn't
Somebody
have to
dropped them off at the door.
Yeah, they didn't have to set anything up. They didn't have to tear it down afterwards. Were driven there, driven back. They stayed in a really nice hotel. The whole schedule was worked around them getting a good night's sleep. You know, all that everything is at that when you're.
And there's a nutritionist making food for them to make sure they got the perfect amount of nutrition they need to keep going.
Sure,
you're probably right.
Sure, I remember. There's a UK artist called Robbie Williams who I'm not a fan of. Not in the slightest.
I know who he is, though.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of him.
I'm not either,
whatsoever.
but I know what you're talking
about.
about.
Anyhow, there was an article saying that he'd played a tour. Well, he'd either played a tour or played at some venue, and it was over so many nights, or had done 6 months of touring, or something like that. And they said, "Oh, Robbie's very tired, and he's going to take the next 6 months off to recover from his hectic schedule." And I was like, "Well, hang on a minute. I've played at least twice a week for the same period of time."
But I had to move my own equipment.
Yeah, not only did I had to drive myself there and back, I was keeping down a day job, and I played for 2 hours or 3 hours for the night and everything. I did everything he did, and I kept down a day job at the same time. How can you be tired? What are you tired of?
You just want a vacation from your vacation.
Yeah, exactly.
You make a valid point, though, because, even me, when you make plans and stuff, you'll be watching celebrities go out and do all this stuff, and you're like, how do they? But then I'm like, well, yeah, Tim makes a good point, because they're not stuck getting up at 7 a.m. every day like I am, or coming home. Somebody's cooking their food, cleaning their house.
Exactly. I mean, it's like I'm a big fan of Penn Jillette, and I listen to his podcast, and he is a celebrity who's probably got a reasonable amount of money with fame, but he gets it. He's like Henry Rollins. He gets it. And he's got this thing where he says, so if you worked a regular job today, he said, if you worked in a restaurant, you worked in an office, you swept the streets, whatever your job was, you worked harder than everybody in the entertainment industry today.
Well, and then, and this is also what I was going to say, though. Sometimes it's funny, like you're saying, he gets it, so he's in touch with reality. And this is not, I'm not going to get political. I'm just going to make one point. It's always interesting when you hear politicians talking, because sometimes when they become career politicians, you feel like they're just out of touch. They're just so out of touch that it's like, you sound like you're going to say, let them eat cake at any given moment. Like, seriously.
Yeah. And though I think the world of rock and roll probably is worse in a lot of ways, because typically there's a lot more money and people around you.
Well, and then, and it's not like, I would imagine an athlete, you've got to exercise constantly, keep yourself in top shape. You know what I'm saying? So that one, it probably has a lot more work behind it in some ways. Mm-hmm. I would think. All right, Tim, we got time for one or two more artists. What we got? Okay, well, we're lucky because we have the people who closed the show at Knebworth. Oh, look at me. I called it right out the gates. Chang. And again, this was the first time I had ever heard this artist or seen this artist. Okay. And that is Pink Floyd. That's so weird to me. I guess everybody had to learn something at some point, but for me, I can't decide. I can't remember a distinct moment. Now, I will say I do have a moment that I think that led me to knowing more about Pink Floyd. Was I had a friend whose cell phone ringtone back in the day when it was like the old school, you had to record it on the radio types of ringtones. She had the part where it's about being in a fishbowl as her ringtone. Wish you were here. Wish you were here. Yeah, the specific part about being in a fishbowl was her ringtone, and it was just that little part she had recorded off the radio on her phone. And I wasn't super familiar with Pink Floyd, but after hearing that on repeat, because her phone would go off every 30 seconds, it seemed like it made me go kind of seek them out a little more. Yeah, and that's the closest I got. Yeah,
I said I'd maybe heard the name Pink Floyd, but I really didn't know any of their music. So this was my very first exposure to Pink Floyd. And it's not, many would consider the classic Pink Floyd lineup because there's no Roger Waters in it. Roger Waters is obviously long since. This is Delicate Sound of Thunder, Division Bell era Pink Floyd. But I mean, the tracks that I think they played a longer set. And in fact, I have the CD, the complete CD of their set, because I think this year, or maybe it was last year, they remastered and re-released their Knebworth set from this concert, but just theirs, because not all of the songs made the broadcast.
Gotcha. Well, it's weird, Tim. Do you know who's a big Pink Floyd fan you would never guess? My husband, Charlie.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
So Charlie has this thing for what almost like flamboyant music. I don't know. It's music that's kind of dramatic. He likes kind of that dramatic sound, and a lot of the Pink Floyd songs, especially some of their bigger hits, have that dramatic, almost larger than life kind of sound, which is why he likes it. He's into that kind of thing. So he will put on Pink Floyd and just listen to it on repeat for hours. I can't do it. I like him for a little bit, but I can't listen to him as much as he does. But Charlie is actually a big Pink Floyd fan. Wow.
See, I like probably Dave Gilmour era Pink Floyd on. The early Pink Floyd, Syd Barrett era Pink Floyd, some of that is hard to listen to. It's very avant-garde. It's very kind of arty.
See, and he's kind of like that. He likes that kind of, that's why I said flamboyant, but avant-garde is probably a better way of describing it.
Yeah, but soon as David Gilmour replaced Syd Barrett, that era onwards is the Pink Floyd that I like. And of course, you've got the classic albums, The Wall and all that kind of stuff. But for me, one of my favorite albums of theirs is the Division Bell. And I think, again, it's driven from this because that was the era that I was introduced to Pink Floyd from this concert.
Well, I know the Division Bell, one of their songs that I really like is High Hopes.
Yep.
Which is one of their main songs on there. That's the first one I think of off the top of my head. And of course, like you said, Dark Side of the Moon, The Wall, Wish You Were Here, all that is they're really big. Most people know him for, but I mean, when I say I've had to listen to a lot of Pink Floyd on repeat in this house, it's not a joke.
I like Keep Talking off the Division Bell, and it has Professor Stephen Hawking's is on it.
And then isn't Marooned on there too?
I think so.
That's
possibly.
that era.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on it, or do quote me on it and correct me later. Don't come for me, internet. I think it's around that era. But I don't have the track list in front of me. But that was another one that I liked from that time period, though.
It's cool.
Was Marooned.
It's cool.
A cool song.
Now the other cool thing is that for Knebworth and indeed the entire era of this, and also at Live Aid 2, David Gilmour was not playing that black Strat, the one that he sold for however million. You familiar with that story where he sold all his guitar equipment?
I think you might have told me one time, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's getting older and he's got a huge guitar collection. So he decided that he would sell them off while he still had name recognition and donate the money to a charity that was important to him. And he donated it all to a climate change charity, which is important to him. But what he sold, I mean, he has replicas that he plays now, but this black Strat, which is a guitar that he put together from various parts from different years, all the classic Pink Floyd stuff was recorded on it, and he sold it at auction. And the guy who bought it was the owner of a football team, I think, or a baseball team, one of the two. And he wasn't necessarily a musician, but he has lots of money, obviously, because he owns a sports team. And they asked him, and they said, hey, whatever this guy's name, why did you buy the black Strat? And he says, I effing love Pink Floyd.
Are you sure his name wasn't Charlie in a past life?
Anyway, but he's not playing that guitar on this. For this era, he was playing a red Strat. It was a 57 reissue with EMGs in it. And sometime after this, I played that very guitar.
What? That specific one.
That specific one. I used to go to Chandler Guitars in Kew, which was a famous guitar shop in London. Everybody who's anybody would go in there and buy stuff and have stuff repaired or have stuff worked on. And there was a guy in there who I vaguely knew who was like an apprentice in the workshop. And he probably shouldn't have done this. And I went in there to pick something. I said,
you can admit it now.
Yeah, well, the shop is now closed. That guy doesn't work there, so it's fine. So he said, we got Gilmour's gear in. Do you want to come and see it? I was like, yeah. Let's look at some Gilmour's gear. So he takes me into the workshop and he pulls out the Les Paul that Another Brick in the Wall solo's played on. Mm-hmm. Hands that to me, so I played that one too. And then he pulls out a Fender Esquire, which is like a Telecaster, and he gave that to me to play. And that is the one that he played on Run Like Hell. And then he goes into another case and he pulls out this red 57 reissue Strat, which is the one he played on Pulse, Knebworth 90, Live Aid, and Delicate Sound of Thunder.
So you know what I started thinking of while you're talking about this? Imagine if the artist that was bringing their guitars knew that some random dude working there was just letting people come in and play on their equipment.
Yeah, they probably, I mean, I think...
They might not be too happy.
They probably wouldn't be too happy, but equally, at that kind of level, you often are not the one who's taking the stuff in or caring for it day to day. You have a person who is your tech.
Let's say the tech who brought it in.
Yeah, the tech would probably not be best pleased.
His head might spread off.
David Gilmour would care is he gets his guitar back and it plays great. But the tech would probably not be best impressed with that because he's the one who has to look after it.
And he'd be like, "Are you kidding me? Do you know what would have happened to me if anything happened during that moment?" One time, Tim, though, I have to tell you, as a guitarist, I did something bad to another guitarist. I'm not a guitarist, but they were. He left his guitar on the ground and I stepped on it. That happened once. I put a crack in his guitar. But then I taught him a lesson about don't leave your guitar sitting on the ground with multiple people walking around.
No, I mean,
Tyler.
If it had been a Fender Precision bass, you would have hurt your foot.
I did. No, it was an acoustic, so it had like the wood. It stabbed me.
It was fighting back. So that's how I got an injury. Joy, it was fighting back.
Yeah, he wasn't too impressed, but I paid for him to get a new one and it all worked out. But he learned a valuable lesson about don't leave important things on the ground when people are walking around, including guitars. It was behind a couch. I didn't know it was there.
Well, I think, ladies and gentlemen, on that important life lesson that Joy has taught us this evening,
injury.
And another injury. There, another one for your bingo cards. Well, we will bid you farewell for this week. I will say, before we go, if you do have the Spotify or any of that kind of stuff, look up Knebworth 90 and have a listen to it. And in particular, have a listen to the Genesis medley, because I think that is absolute genius. But you may enjoy it, you may not, but that's my recommendation for the week for you.
All right, sounds good. Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Another day to